This is why you should never share your good news, not even with your best friend. Because in one kingdom, a woman trusted the person closest to her with the happiest secret of her life. And that same person betrayed her so deeply. She was erased from human life and thrown into a river. The worst part, the entire kingdom believed she was gone forever. But the river was hiding something no one expected. In the riverside kingdom of Amalunar, two girls grew up so close that people stopped calling them separate names. They simply said, the two friends. If Ezinne was walking to the river, Somi was beside her. If Somi was laughing in the market, Ezinne was the reason. From childhood, they shared everything. Water pots. Festival food. Secrets whispered under quiet night skies. The elders of the village often watched them and smiled. Friendship like this is rare, one old woman once said. And when you find it, you must guard it. But no one believed their friendship needed guarding. It seemed too strong to break. Ezinne had a calm spirit. People trusted her easily. She listened more than she spoke. When someone was sad, she was the first to notice. When work became heavy, she was the first to help. That quiet kindness made people love her without effort. Somi was different. She was sharp. Quick with words. Quick with plans. If there was a problem, Somi already had 3 ideas to solve it. Where Ezinne brought peace, Somi brought fire. And somehow, the two balanced each other perfectly. When they walked through the village together, people often joked. If these two ever separate, the sky will probably fall. They fetched water together almost every morning. The path to the river curved through tall grass and smooth stones warmed by the sun. Sometimes they sang while walking. Sometimes they argued about small things and laughed before the path ended. Sometimes they simply walked in silence, comfortable in each other's company. One evening during a moonlit gathering, a group of young girls watched them from a distance. "I want a friend like that," one of them whispered. Someone else replied, "You won't find another friendship like theirs." The truth was simple. Somi knew everything about Ezinne. And Ezinne trusted Somi with everything. There were no secrets between them. At least, that was what Ezinne believed. Because when people trust deeply, they stop protecting themselves. They stop watching carefully. They open every door of their life without fear. And that is often where dangerous stories begin. Not with enemies. Not with strangers. But with someone who already knows every path into your heart. At that time, neither of them knew how quickly life could change. They did not know that destiny was already moving quietly toward them. They did not know that joy was about to enter their lives. And they certainly did not know that the same joy would plant the first seed of betrayal. Because sometimes the most painful betrayal does not start with hatred. It starts with comparison. And comparison is a quiet poison. It does not shout. It whispers. It waits. And once it enters a heart, even the strongest friendship can begin to crack without anyone noticing. But on those early days in Amalunar, nothing seemed broken. Two friends. One path. One future. Or so the village believed. The New Yam festival was the biggest day in Amalunar. From early morning, the village changed. Women wore bright wrappers. Drums echoed across the open square. Smoke from cooking fires rose slowly into the sky. Children ran through the crowd chasing each other while elders sat beneath large trees, watching everything with quiet pride. It was a day of food, dancing, and blessing. But it was also the day the ruler walked among his people. Dumabi, the young ruler of Amalunar, rarely appeared in public without reason. So when word spread that he would attend the festival, the entire village came alive with excitement. Girls carefully tied their hair. Young men stood straighter than usual. Everyone hoped to be noticed. By afternoon, the square was full. Drummers struck their instruments with deep rhythm. Dancers stepped forward one by one, hoping to impress. Some danced boldly. Some laughed loudly. Some tried too hard. In the middle of the crowd, Ezinne and Somi stood together, watching. Somi nudged her friend. "You should join the dancers," she whispered. Ezinne shook her head quickly. "You know I don't like standing in front of everyone." Somi laughed softly. "You are too shy." Before Ezinne could reply, a small disturbance happened near the front of the crowd. An elderly woman had stumbled while trying to move closer to see the ruler. People stepped aside awkwardly, unsure what to do. Ezinne noticed immediately. Without thinking, she pushed through the crowd and knelt beside the old woman. "Are you hurt?" she asked gently. The woman shook her head but struggled to stand. Ezinne supported her carefully. She brushed dust from the woman's wrapper and helped guide her to a quiet place to sit. It was a simple act. Small. Almost invisible in a crowded festival. But someone important had seen it. Dumabi. From where he stood near the elders, his eyes followed Ezinne as she returned quietly to the crowd. He watched the way she avoided attention. The way she smiled softly when the old woman thanked her. The way she returned to stand beside Somi as if nothing unusual had happened. Dumabi looked again. Then he looked a second time. And something about Ezinne stayed in his mind. Nearby, Somi had noticed the ruler's gaze. At first she said nothing. She simply followed the direction of his eyes. When she realized who he was watching, she smiled. But the smile was slower than usual. "You see?" Somi whispered lightly. "Even the ruler noticed you." Ezinne frowned. "Don't joke like that." "I'm not joking," Somi said quietly. Ezinne shook her head again, embarrassed. She thought the moment meant nothing. Just another festival. Just another crowd. Just another passing glance. But Somi continued watching the ruler. And she noticed something Ezinne did not. Dumabi was still looking. Even after the dancers returned. Even after the drums changed rhythm. Even after the crowd shifted. His eyes searched for Ezinne again. Somi turned back to her friend. This time her smile looked normal. But inside her chest, something small had appeared. Something sharp. Something uncomfortable. Not anger. Not yet. Just a thought that refused to leave. A thought that quietly asked a dangerous question. Why her, and not me? A few weeks after the New Yam festival, something unexpected happened in Amalunar. Messengers from the palace arrived at Ezinne's family compound. The moment people saw the royal staff they carried, whispers began spreading across the village. Royal messengers rarely visited ordinary homes. When they did, something important was always behind it. Ezinne's mother quickly invited them inside. Neighbors gathered near the entrance pretending to pass by. Everyone wanted to know why the palace had come. The eldest messenger spoke calmly. "Our ruler, Dumabi, sends greetings to this household." Ezinne stood quietly behind her mother, confused. Then the man continued. "Our ruler has chosen a wife." The compound fell silent. "He has chosen Ezinne." For a moment no one moved. Then everything exploded. Women began shouting in joy. Children started running through the yard repeating the news. Men raised their voices in praise to the ancestors. Ezinne felt her knees weaken. She had expected many things in life. But not this. Her mother grabbed her shoulders, laughing and crying at the same time. "The ruler has chosen you." Before long the entire compound filled with celebration. But Ezinne's mind was already somewhere else. There was one person she needed to see first. Without waiting for the excitement to settle, she slipped out of the compound and hurried down the familiar path towards Somi's hut. Her heart was racing. By the time she arrived, she was almost breathless. "Somi," she called. Somi stepped outside, surprised. "Ezinne? What happened?" Ezinne grabbed her hands immediately. "You won't believe what just happened." "What?" "The ruler sent elders to my house." Somi stared. "And?" "He asked for my hand in marriage." For a moment Somi said nothing. Then she forced a wide smile. What? Ezinne. She hugged her tightly. I knew something like this would happen one day. Ezinne laughed nervously. I still cannot believe it. Somi held her shoulders. You're going to be queen. Ezinne lowered her voice suddenly. There's something else. Somi leaned closer. What? Ezinne looked around to make sure no one was nearby, then she whispered. I visited the diviner 2 days ago. Somi's smile slowly faded. The diviner said the spirits have already marked my womb. Silence filled the small space between them. He said I will soon carry a child. She lowered her voice even further. The ruler's child. Somi blinked. The future heir. Ezinne laughed softly, overwhelmed with emotion. I didn't even know how to say it aloud. She squeezed Somi's hands again. You are the first person I have told. Somi nodded slowly. You trusted me first. Of course, Ezinne said warmly. Who else would I tell? Somi hugged her again. But this time her eyes were open. While Ezinne spoke about the palace, the future, and the life ahead, Somi's thoughts grew heavy. In one moment, everything had changed. Ezinne now had the ruler, the palace, the crown, and the child who would inherit the kingdom. Somi continued smiling and nodding while her friend spoke. But deep inside her chest, something had begun to grow. Something quiet. Something dark. Something she did not yet understand. But that moment would later become the moment everything truly changed. Because that was the moment Somi realized something painful. Ezinne now had everything she had ever dreamed of having. And for the first time in their lives, Somi began to wonder what it would feel like if that life belonged to her instead. After the palace elders left Ezinne's compound, the news spread across Amaluna like fire in dry grass. Everywhere people talked about it. At the river. In the market. Outside cooking fires in the evening. The ruler has chosen Ezinne. Women smiled when they spoke her name. She has always been a good girl. The ancestors have blessed her. Some even began calling her something new. Mother of Tomorrow. At first Ezinne felt shy whenever she heard it. She was not used to so much attention. But the village was already preparing for the royal marriage. Cloths were being woven. Palm wine was being stored. Elders discussed the ceremony dates. And everywhere Ezinne went, people blessed her. Many of them placed a hand gently on her stomach. May the child be strong. May the throne be blessed. Ezinne accepted every blessing with quiet gratitude. Through all of this, Somi stayed beside her. If people saw Ezinne, Somi was usually close. Helping with preparations. Carrying cloth bundles. Laughing when others joked about palace life. To everyone watching, their friendship still looked perfect. Nothing seemed different. But something had changed. The first change was small. It was Somi's smile. She still smiled often. But the meaning behind it had shifted. Before, her smile came easily. Now it felt heavier. Like something she had to remember to do. Every day new gifts arrived for Ezinne. Colorful wrappers. Beads. Food from distant relatives. Women came to help prepare her for palace life. Each time Somi watched quietly. At night she returned to her hut exhausted. Not from work. From thinking. She would lie on her mat staring at the roof. Listening to the night insects outside. And the same thoughts returned again and again. Why her? Why Ezinne? Somi knew she worked hard. She knew she was clever. Many people even said she was more outspoken and confident. But none of that mattered now. The ruler had chosen Ezinne. And soon Ezinne would live in the palace. Soon she would wear royal cloth. Soon she would give birth to the future ruler. While Somi would remain exactly where she was. In the same hut. On the same dusty path. watching someone else live the life she had quietly imagined for herself. The thought burned inside her. At first she tried to push it away. She reminded herself that Ezinne was her friend. Her closest friend. But each new celebration made the feeling stronger. Each blessing spoken over Ezinne felt like something was being taken from Somi. Even though no one had promised it to her. Even though it had never truly been hers. Still the feeling grew. Slowly. Quietly. Dangerously. One evening, while women prepared cloth for the wedding ceremony, someone laughed and said something that stayed in Somi's mind long after everyone left. If Ezinne becomes queen, the woman joked, she must not forget her childhood friends. Everyone laughed. Even Somi. But later that night, alone in her hut, Somi whispered something into the darkness. Something she should never have allowed herself to think. If Ezinne was not here. She stopped speaking. The silence around her suddenly felt heavy. Her heart beat faster. She knew the thought was wrong. Very wrong. But the problem was no longer the thought itself. The problem was something else. For the first time since the thought entered her mind, Somi did not push it away. After that night, Somi began to change. At first, no one noticed. She still visited Ezinne. She still helped with wedding preparations. She still laughed when people joked about palace life. But something inside her was no longer calm. The thought she had whispered in the dark refused to leave her mind. If Ezinne was not here. The words had shocked her when she first said them. She had even sat up quickly on her mat, afraid of her own voice. But the more she thought about it, the less frightening it became. Instead, the idea slowly began to feel possible. That was the dangerous part. During the day, Somi watched everything around her more carefully. She watched the way villagers praised Ezinne. She watched the way elders greeted her with respect. She watched the way people looked at her stomach when they spoke. Every blessing spoken over Ezinne felt like a reminder of what Somi would never have. One afternoon, while they were both walking back from the river, Ezinne began talking excitedly about the palace. I heard the palace garden has trees that bloom all year, she said. Somi nodded quietly. And the palace women are already preparing my room. That is good, Somi replied. Ezinne smiled warmly. I'm still nervous about everything. But I know you will visit me often. Of course, Somi said. You will still be my closest friend. Those words stayed with Somi long after they parted. Closest friend. But still outside the palace. Still outside the life that was coming. That night Somi could not sleep. She kept turning on her mat. Each time she closed her eyes, she imagined Ezinne sitting beside Dumabi. Wearing royal cloth. Holding the future ruler of the kingdom in her arms. While the entire village bowed. And Somi would stand somewhere in the crowd. Watching. Clapping. Pretending to be happy. The thought made her chest tighten. Suddenly she remembered something she had heard years ago as a child. A story older women sometimes whispered about. Deep inside the forbidden forest lived someone people feared to visit. A woman who understood things ordinary people did not. A woman who knew how to change what fate had already decided. Most people only spoke about her in low voices. Because those who visited her rarely came back unchanged. Somi sat up slowly. Her heart began to beat faster. She told herself she was only curious. Only curious. Nothing more. She would not ask for anything terrible. She only wanted answers. Maybe even advice. Maybe someone who could tell her how to stop feeling this way. But deep down, another voice inside her already knew the truth. She was not going there to stop the dark thought. She was going there because she had begun to believe the thought might become real. Before the sun rose the next morning, Somi left her hut quietly. The village was still asleep. Mist hung low over the ground. She walked toward the path that led into the forest. Each step felt heavier than the last. But she did not stop. Because sometimes the moment that changes everything begins with a single decision. And that morning, Somi had already made hers. Before sunrise, the forest was silent. Mist covered the ground like a thin blanket. Somi walked carefully along the narrow path that led deeper into the trees. The village was far behind her now. Few people ever came this way. Not unless fear had already lost its power over them. Every step made her heart beat faster. Part of her wanted to turn back. But another part pushed her forward. She had already come too far. After a long walk, she saw it. A crooked hut made from twisted branches and old wood. Thin smoke rose slowly from a small fire outside. Sitting beside the fire was an old woman. Her hair was white. Her eyes were sharp. She did not look surprised to see Somi. In fact, she smiled slowly. "I wondered how long it would take," the woman said. Somi froze. "You knew I was coming?" The old woman stirred the fire calmly. "People only walk this path for one reason." Somi felt her throat tighten. She stepped closer. "I need help." The old woman nodded as if she had already heard those words many times before. "Tell me." At first Somi hesitated. But once she started speaking, the words poured out quickly. She spoke about Ezinne. About the ruler. About the marriage. About the child. About the life that was slipping further away from her with every passing day. Her voice trembled. "I cannot watch her take everything." The forest woman listened without interrupting. When Somi finished, the old woman stared at her for a long moment. Then she spoke quietly. "You do not want advice." Somi looked confused. "You want change." The words hung in the air. Somi did not deny it. The old woman reached beside her and pulled out a small clay bottle. Inside the bottle was a dark liquid. "This will change your problem." Somi stared at it. "What does it do?" The old woman's voice was calm. "It will not kill your friend." Somi swallowed slowly. "Then what will it do?" "It will remove her from the life she is about to live." Somi's heart beat harder. "How?" "When she drinks this," the woman said slowly, "her human form will disappear." Somi felt cold. "What do you mean?" "She will become something else. Something tied to the river." The words made Somi uneasy. But the woman continued. "She will still live, but no one will recognize her." Somi stared at the bottle again. "And the ruler?" "He will believe she vanished." Silence filled the space between them. Then the old woman leaned closer. "But there is something you must understand." Somi looked up. "Your friend carries royal blood inside her. Because of that, the transformation cannot destroy her destiny completely." "What does that mean?" "It means the destiny will be buried, not erased." Somi frowned. "One day, the truth will try to rise again." Somi's fingers tightened slowly. "That day will not matter," she said quietly. The forest woman studied her face. "Are you sure?" Somi did not answer with words. She simply reached for the clay bottle. The moment her hand closed around it, something inside her life shifted forever. Because some decisions cannot be undone once they are made. And Somi had just chosen the path of betrayal. Somi returned to the village before the sun was high. The clay bottle was hidden inside her wrapper. All the way back from the forest, she kept touching it, just to be sure it was still there. Each time her fingers felt the shape of the bottle, her heart beat harder. Part of her still hoped something would stop her. But nothing did. When she reached her hut, she sat down and stared at the bottle for a long time. The dark liquid inside moved slowly when she tilted it. This small bottle now held the power to change everything. Ezinne's future. The palace. The throne. Even the child growing inside her. Somi closed her eyes. Then she whispered quietly to herself. It is already too late to turn back. That evening she went to find Ezinne. She wore her warmest smile. "Come to my hut tonight," Somi said cheerfully. "We should celebrate before the wedding preparations become too serious." Ezinne laughed. "You are right. I have hardly had time to breathe these days." "I will prepare palm wine and herbs," Somi said. "I will come," Ezinne promised. Night arrived slowly. A soft wind moved through the village. Inside Somi's hut, a small fire burned near the cooking pot. 2 cups sat on the floor. Somi held the clay bottle with careful hands. Her fingers trembled slightly as she opened it. The smell was sharp and strange. For a moment, she hesitated. Then she poured the dark liquid into one of the cups and mixed it with palm wine. The color disappeared completely. No one would notice. A few moments later, Ezinne's voice came from outside. "Somi?" "Come in," Somi replied. Ezinne stepped inside, smiling warmly. "You prepared everything already?" "Of course," Somi said lightly. They sat together as they had done many times before. For a while they simply talked. Ezinne spoke about the palace. About how nervous she felt. About the child she was carrying. She even reached out and squeezed Somi's hand. "I am lucky to have you," Ezinne said softly. Somi forced a smile. "You deserve happiness." Then she handed Ezinne the cup. "Drink. Tonight we celebrate." Ezinne did not hesitate. She trusted her friend completely. She lifted the cup and drank. For a few seconds nothing happened. Then Ezinne's face changed. Her hand moved slowly to her stomach. "Somi, something feels wrong." The cup slipped from her fingers. Her body shook. Pain twisted across her face. "Somi!" Her voice broke into a cry. Somi stepped back in fear. Ezinne's fingers curled. Her skin began to glow strangely. Golden light flickered across her arms. "What is happening to me?" Ezinne gasped. Her body began to shrink. Her form twisted painfully. The glow grew stronger. Within moments, the girl who had once been Ezinne was gone. In her place lay a small golden creature covered in shining scales. But the eyes were still the same. Wide. Terrified. Human. Somi stared at it in horror. Even she had not imagined it would look like this. The creature made a weak sound. As if it was trying to speak. Somi's hands began to shake. For 1 second she almost reached down to help. But fear stopped her. If anyone saw this, everything would be ruined. Quickly, she wrapped the creature in cloth. The creature struggled weakly. Tears filled its eyes. But Somi forced herself not to look too closely. She carried the bundle through the dark path toward the river. The water moved slowly under the moonlight. For a moment Somi stood at the edge. Her breathing was heavy. Then she threw the bundle into the water. The river swallowed it instantly. The surface became calm again. The forest was silent. And in that moment, the friendship that had once been the pride of Amalunar died forever. Morning came, but Ezinne did not return home. At first, no one worried. People assumed she had stayed with Somi longer than usual. But when the sun rose high and she was still missing, her mother began asking questions. "Has anyone seen Ezinne?" Neighbors shook their heads. Soon the question spread through the compound. Someone went to Somi's hut. Somi opened the door slowly, her face already heavy with concern. "Ezinne," she said. "She left my place last night." Her voice sounded worried. She said she wanted to walk by the river before going home. The moment those words were spoken, fear entered the air. The river. Everyone knew the river could be dangerous at night. Within an hour, the entire village was searching. Men carried torches. Women called Ezinne's name across the fields. Children ran between houses repeating the news. Even the palace guards joined the search. Word reached Dumabi quickly. The ruler did not wait for explanations. He rode toward the river immediately. When he arrived, dozens of villagers were already moving along the riverbank. "Did anyone see her?" he demanded. No one answered. One by one, people shook their heads. The river moved quietly beside them, giving nothing back. Searchers spread through the forest. They checked the paths. They checked the tall grass. They checked every place she might have walked. But there was no sign of her. No cloth. No footprints. No body. Only silence. As the hours passed, the search became more desperate. Ezinne's mother cried until her voice broke. Her father sat beside the river with his head in his hands. And Dumabi refused to leave the water's edge. He stood there staring into the dark current as if it might speak. When night came, torches lit the riverbank. But still nothing was found. Behind the crowd, Somi stood among the villagers. She cried loudly. She held Ezinne's mother when the woman nearly collapsed. "I was the last one to see her," Somi said through tears. She seemed happy. She said she wanted fresh air. No one doubted her words. Why would they? Somi had always been Ezinne's closest friend. If anything, people trusted her more than anyone else. By the second night, the village began whispering a terrible possibility. Maybe the river had taken her. Maybe she slipped. Maybe the current carried her away. But Dumabi refused to accept it. Late that night he stood alone beside the water. The moon reflected across the slow waves. He closed his eyes and called her name softly. "Ezinne." Only the sound of the river answered. After a long moment, he spoke again. "I know you are not gone." He did not know why he believed it. There was no proof. No sign. Nothing but an empty river and broken hope. But deep inside him, something refused to believe she had vanished forever. Behind him, the kingdom slowly began to mourn. Songs stopped. Drums fell silent. Joy disappeared from Amalunor. And beside the grieving crowd, the one person responsible for the tragedy stood unnoticed. Somi wiped tears from her face as villagers comforted her. No one suspected her. No one questioned her. And that made the betrayal even more powerful. Because the one who had destroyed Ezinne's life was now standing safely inside the circle of trust. Days passed after Ezinne disappeared. But peace did not return to Amalunor. The village moved slowly, as if something important had been taken from it. The wedding song stopped. Women spoke in low voices. Even the children played less. At the palace, Dumabi changed. Before Ezinne vanished, he had been full of quiet strength. Now he barely spoke. Food was placed before him, but he rarely touched it. Advisors came to discuss village matters, but his attention drifted away. Every evening, he walked alone to the river. The guards followed at a distance, unsure what to do. Sometimes he stood there for hours, staring at the water. As if the river might return what it had taken. One night, after standing beside the water for a long time, Dumabi finally returned to the palace and fell into restless sleep. That was when the dreams began. At first the dream was simple. Water. Endless water shining under moonlight. The river looked brighter than it did in real life. Almost golden. Dumabi walked along the edge, calling a name he had spoken many times before. Ezinne. The water moved gently. Then he heard something. A faint sound. Like someone trying to speak from far away. He stepped closer. Ezinne? For a moment he thought he saw something beneath the surface. A flash of gold. Then it vanished. He woke suddenly. His heart was beating fast. The room was dark and silent. He told himself it was only grief. Only a dream. But the next night, the dream returned. Again he stood beside shining water. Again he heard the faint sound. This time the voice was clearer. It sounded weak. But it was calling his name. Dumabi. He turned quickly. But there was no one on the riverbank. Only the water moving slowly. Then he saw it again. Something beneath the surface. Golden scales. A shape moving through the river. And eyes. Eyes that looked full of sorrow. Just as he stepped closer, the water rippled and the shape disappeared. Dumabi woke again. Sweat covered his face. The dream felt too real. Night after night, the same dream returned. Sometimes the voice sounded closer. Sometimes the golden shape appeared for longer. But each time, the dream ended before he could reach it. Soon Dumabi began to believe something strange. Ezinne might not be dead. He had no proof. Nothing he could show the elders. Nothing he could explain to anyone. But his heart refused to accept the story everyone else believed. One evening, while standing beside the river again, he whispered into the wind. "If you are still somewhere, find a way to reach me." The water moved quietly. No answer came. Behind him, the village continued to mourn. And not far away, Somi watched the ruler carefully. She noticed the way he kept returning to the river. She noticed the tired look in his eyes. And slowly, a new fear began to grow inside her. Because if Dumabi kept believing Ezinne was still alive, then the life Somi was trying to claim might not remain safe for long. Time passed. But Dumabi did not recover. Even when the search for Ezinne slowly faded, the ruler did not return to the man he had once been. He still visited the river. He still spoke her name when he thought no one was listening. And sometimes, when he sat among the elders, his eyes looked distant. As if part of him was somewhere else. Somi watched this carefully. At first she believed Ezinne's disappearance would solve everything. But something was wrong. Dumabi was not moving on. Instead, he seemed trapped between grief and hope. And hope was dangerous. Because hope meant he had not truly forgotten Ezinne. One evening Somi made a decision. She left the village again before sunrise. The path through the forest felt familiar now. When she reached the crooked hut, the forest woman was already outside. "You returned," the old woman said calmly. Somi nodded. "He still thinks about her." The woman stirred the fire slowly. "Love does not disappear easily." "I needed to disappear," Somi replied quietly. The forest woman studied her face. "You want the ruler's heart?" "Yes." The old woman reached into a small basket and pulled out a red charm tied with thin thread. "This will bend his feelings toward you." Somi stared at it. "What must I give in return?" The woman's voice became colder. "If you take love by force, life will take something from you as well." Somi frowned. "What does that mean?" "You will never carry a child." The words hung in the air. Somi's heart skipped. "No child?" The forest woman nodded. "The wound that steals destiny cannot create its own." For the first time since coming to the forest, Somi hesitated. She imagined the future. The palace. The throne. Standing beside Dumabi as queen. But also something else. Silence where children's laughter should be. The old woman watched her carefully. "You can still walk away." Somi looked down at the charm again. Then she remembered Ezinne. Her beauty. Her kindness. The way the whole village spoke about the child she carried. Somi's jaw tightened. "I will take the charm." The forest woman handed it to her. "Mix it into his food." Somi closed her fingers around it. She did not ask another question. By nightfall she had returned to the palace. Days later, the charm found its way into Dumabi's meal. At first nothing seemed different. But slowly something began to change. The ruler's heavy grief softened. The restless dreams faded. And when he looked at Somi, his eyes began to linger longer than before. Then one morning, the palace announced something that shocked the entire kingdom. Dumabi would marry Somi. Villagers whispered in confusion. Some felt uneasy. Others said grief had pushed the ruler to choose someone close to Ezinne. But Somi walked into the palace wearing royal cloth and quiet satisfaction. She had taken the throne. She had taken the ruler. She believed she had erased Ezinne forever. The kingdom believed the same. But far away from the palace, deep inside the slow-moving river, something golden opened its eyes. But what no one in the kingdom knows is that the river has been hiding the truth all along. And very soon, someone is going to discover what really happened to Ezinne. If you want to see what happens next, make sure you subscribe and follow the channel, because in part 2, the river will reveal a secret powerful enough to shake the entire palace. And Somi's greatest fear will finally begin to come true. The question is, when the truth finally comes out, will it be too late?